A few days ago, I did a video titled The Truth About Yu-Gi-Oh! Ban Lists, and in that video, I didn't necessarily defend the way that Konami has implemented how the new ban list structure works, where we don't really know when it's going to happen. However, I did defend the fact that I don't think it was an accidental decision to make ban lists that way. If you watch that video, you know that I talked about the history of how ban lists were, because they used to be 6 months, and then they were 4 months, and now they're just kind of anything. And in that video, I sort of documented the reason that Konami changed it to be just random times, arbitrarily sort of picked months that ban lists would happen. And in that video, I kind of talked about that the reason that happened, just like a quick summary, is that they didn't want to feel pressured to make a ban list in the middle of formats when they didn't feel that they needed a ban list. And what they did with that is, now that we have just vague, no sooner than August type ban lists, now that we have that, they can give us a ban list whenever they see fit. However, the problem is that the player base sees the ban list should be here now, whereas Konami does not feel the ban list should be here now. And that's where the issue sort of stems from. But I think at its core, they actually did go in with good intentions. They're just executing it poorly, as is per Konami. Anyway, I say all that because today's video is another version of the Truth About series, and I might do this more often, where we kind of delve into why Konami does what they do and kind of talk about that maybe they're not implementing it correctly, but that their intentions were in the right place, maybe change your perspective on Konami a little bit. Now, as the title would suggest, today I want to talk about the truth behind link summoning and how I think Konami came to the decision to actually implement it into the game. Now, whether or not you like link summoning or dislike link summoning doesn't really matter for watching this video. This isn't so much an opinion about link summoning itself. I'm just going to go through what I think the thought process was when Konami designed this mechanic, because I actually do think they had good intentions. Now, I do not think their intentions were to slow down the game. I know a lot of people said that that's what link summoning was for. Konami never really implied that. However, I do think they were trying to do two specific things. The first thing is that I do believe they were trying to restrict pendulum summoning. Pendulum summoning did a couple things that really messed up Yu-Gi-Oh! Yes, it sort of broke the extra deck in more ways than one. It broke it in that, like, it always was a resource that you could just special summon for free. I don't think that they actually liked that. I think one of the things that link summoning showed, even at the height of like pendulum editions, is that Konami really doesn't like you pendulum summoning 5 monsters from your extra deck every single turn. Now, I will say that pendulum summoning as a whole was not as impactful as a lot of people thought it was, but some of the best pendulum summoning decks like Full Power Pepe were just absolutely ridiculous, and it really showed how broken that mechanic could be. So I think that Konami did want to fix that. One of the ways that they fixed that, I think one of the things that was broken was the actual game mat. Now, this is where I think they implemented it wrong, because they fixed the game mat in one way. I think pendulums always should have been in the back row where they are right now. I think that would have solved a whole bunch of confusion with those cards. But to do that, they had to break it in another way by putting these extra monster zones. But I can at least sympathize with why they decided to do that. I think they really did want to fix pendulum summoning, and they didn't really know how, other than restricting all extra deck summoning, because it'd be kind of confusing to a lot of new players if you told them, okay, these link monsters, they have arrows, but just completely ignore them if you're not playing pendulum monsters. Like, if they only use the arrows for pendulum monsters, I think that'd be really confusing. And also, I think that link monsters would be even more powerful, probably way too powerful, if that's how they worked. If you could summon normal extra deck monsters wherever you want to, except it just randomly restricts pendulum summon. So I think Konami wanted to restrict pendulum summoning. I think that they accidentally restricted everything, but I think the intention was there. But where else does link summoning come in? What else was Konami thinking when they designed link monsters? Here's what I think really happened. Konami sat down and they said, you know what? We are restricted in card design. And what I mean by this, and sorry to anyone that was in my recent live stream because I already went on this tangent, but what I mean by this is Konami sat down and said, we can't make decks that don't either have tuner monsters or monsters of the same level, because for the most part, and there certainly are examples where this doesn't actually stay true, but for the most part, since the introduction of synchro monsters and then the introduction of exceed monsters, you had to have one of those two things. And I think the one place where that really didn't happen was in Shadal's and Necros. Those two decks really didn't follow that criteria. However, in general, over the past 10 years or so that synchros have been out, I think it's about 10 years now, we're coming up with 10-year anniversary. I did that like 9 years ago video last year. But anyway, 10 years of synchros and exceeds and pendulums and all that kind of stuff. For the most part, even in the pendulum decks like Pepe, you either had to have monsters that one of them was a tuner monster, or two of them were a tuner monster, or you had to have monsters that were the same level. We think of decks like Burning Abyss. We think of decks like any rank 4 deck, really. There's so many of them, like Girgia, Hat, Spirits, all the sort of decks that have level 3 monsters or level 4 monsters, or they're a synchro strategy. And that's really restrictive from Konami's end. So I think what they said is that we feel too restricted to make decks that fall into those categories with tuner monsters or with the same level of monsters, and we want to build a better variety of decks. Better variety of extra deck types. How do we do that without making it too broken? How do we make extra deck monsters that are really generic, like Link monsters, without completely breaking the game? And what their intention was then, or what their solution was, their intended solution, is that by putting link markers on the link monsters, they could make these really generic link monsters, these really generic extra deck monsters, but they could do it without breaking everything. And this is their intention. I'm not saying that this has actually happened, but I think they sat there, and the link markers in particular, not only were they restricting pendulum monsters, but they were restricting themselves. Now, in general, this is a bad time to talk about this because we're at the height of like Goki Extra Link format, which is obviously really annoying, but I think in general, this mostly does the job. If you look at decks like Altergeist and Trickstars and even Goki, as much as we hate Goki, even decks like Goki, but all three of those strategies, none of them have tuners. None of them really have the same level of monsters. They all sort of share the same format where they have a level 1 monster, level 2 monster, level 3 monster, level 4 monster. Those types of decks couldn't exist without link summoning. And you might be saying, well, I hate those decks, so therefore link summoning shouldn't exist. I wouldn't have to deal with them. And while I do understand where you're coming from, I think in general it actually does sort of make card design easier. I think they can make decks with less of a focus. I mean, think of how many rank 4 strategies we had where every single deck, even if it had like different main deck monsters, they were always just summoning Castel or Diamond Direwolf or Lavalva Chain or Dagusto Emerald. Even if they had like crazy different main deck monsters, like I think of like the Spirit deck that I played in 2014, it was pretty much the same thing. You were just ending on a handful of rank 4 monsters. There were like 10 that were super common. Maybe your deck had an archetype rank 4 monster, but for the most part, I feel like they were just playing the same stuff. Number 101 Silent Honor Arc, Exciton Knight, all these cards that no matter what deck you were playing against, if they were playing level 4 monsters, you would see it over and over again. And I think for the most part, link summoning has kind of alleviated that issue. I think we actually see a variety of monsters, but I think that's where Konami was coming from. They really were looking at it and how can we make decks function with a whole slew of different levels without putting tuner monsters, because I mean synchros are pretty awkward to summon. I mean, if we're being completely honest, it's kind of awkward in 2018 to have a tuner monster and then matching levels of non-tuner monsters to make the exact synchro that you want. And I think Konami knew that, so they wanted to spice it up by making generic monsters just that anyone can use, and that sort of opened up their side of card design to make generic decks with a variety of levels that weren't necessarily tied to tuner monsters or the same level of cards. I do want to clarify that I think on many different accounts, this didn't actually work. I think one of the biggest issues with link summoning, I think there's like 2 main ones. The biggest issue is when they print cards like Firewall Dragon and Skull Dread and all sorts of cards like that are these really big monsters that I think when they designed them, they didn't realize how easy they would be to summon. That seems like bad card design, as well as cards like Needle Fiber and Isolde and Heavy Metal Foes Electromite, these Link 2 monsters that give immense value. Now, the problem with the 3 that I just listed, Isolde, Needle Fiber, and Electromite, is that they're too generic. They go in decks that didn't need the help, and I think the way to fix those cards in all 3 cases is just to make them tied to their archetype. Make it so you can only use Metal Foe monsters to make Electromite. Make it so you can only use Noble Knight monsters to make Isolde. I think that would have fixed those cards, so they're making them too generic for decks that didn't necessarily need it, and I think that's the biggest issue. The other issue, and one that I kind of talked about in yesterday's video at the end of it was I think that they didn't really see tokens and the way that those fit into Link monsters. I think in general, cards like Link Kribo and Link Spider really make Link summoning a lot easier to cheat out. You can cheat out so many big Link monsters just by activating Hornet Drones, just by activating Scapegoat, and I think that's another thing that they didn't really see happening, and that probably should have been tested more. If I really think back to many of the degenerate Link summoning combos, they involve cards like Link Kribo, like Link Spider, to actually link climb into Link monsters that I don't think Konami actually intended you to climb into, at least not with just a singular card like Scapegoat. I don't think Konami wanted Borreload Dragon able to be summoned with just one copy of Scapegoat. I'm pretty sure that's not what they saw that card actually doing. I think they wanted you to use a bunch of monsters to summon it, not just one card and a bunch of tokens. So I think that Konami has failed in some ways to actually make Link summoning work, which I think I've talked about and many other YouTubers have talked about and the comment section talks about, and I'm pretty sure even the comment section of this video will talk about. People that don't really care about what I have to say about where Konami is coming from, but I just want to make this video talking about, I think Konami did have good intentions. I think they were poorly implemented, but don't be too hard on them. I mean, be hard on them. Of course, they deserve feedback, as does everyone, but I think that they really were trying to fix this game for the better and sort of remove the stain of pendulum summoning from Yu-Gi-Oh! Forever. Anyway, though, thank you guys for watching. I'll see you later. Goodbye.